Hey everybody, this is Eric Mueller, the host of The Eric Mueller Show. You're tuned in to the podcast that explores what makes any successful person's inner clock tick by unlocking the most impactful tools within their success portfolio. I'm joined today by Chris Knudsen, a serial entrepreneur, author, and university professor. Chris is here to lay out the roadmap for unhappy employees to take their life's passion through turning their side hustle into self-employment. Why trust Chris? Because he did it himself. Let's head on over to the interview. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, Eric. Appreciate you having me. Excited to talk with you tonight, and hope your audience finds it educational as well.
Man, I'm excited as well, and the audience doesn't know this, Chris, but we've tried a little while to make this interview happen. We've had to reschedule a few times for a few different reasons, and so I've been excited to, having prepared for it a little while ago, I was like, side hustle to self-employment, this is going to be sweet. And so thanks for making the time, Chris, first and foremost, and really before we dive deep into this entrepreneurial story that you have and how we can maybe take a leap from side hustle to self-employment, we want to start by looking at your success portfolio. And so if you're new to this show, quick background, really easy way to view that is to just think of your investments, whether it's 401k, stocks, whatever you might be putting money into to hopefully grow to get to financial freedom or a financial future that you desire. That's a goal of those investments. On the Eric Mueller Show, I really want to discover how successful people like Chris invest in themselves and build that foundation for their success as a whole. So Chris, start us off with maybe some skills or traits, habits or mindsets that make up that success portfolio.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really like what you said there too. I have stocks, but I'm more interested in investing in myself. Honestly, like there was a time where if I would have looked at an amount of money that I had in front of me, and I maybe didn't have a lot of money in front of me, I would have said for sure I'm investing this in myself, whatever that is, to build a skill set, to learn something, to get further education, to fly, go somewhere to a event or a show or something. It would have been spent on that, right? And I'm glad that I spent that. And now I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm like, okay, I have that money, and I also have money I can put other places too, right? So, and that's the goal, is to get to that spot in life where you can do that. But there was a point where, how far back do you want me to go? I can go really far back and be this long, boring story. I can give you like the really abbreviated story and then give you the cool stuff. But
let's say, what do you think is more fun, Chris? Which one do you think is more fun for you to tell? What ignites you more talking about, the longer version or the shorter version? I'll leave it to you.
I'm going to talk about the shorter version because I want to make sure that we give the audience enough value so that they can figure out how to make the leap, like what I call crossing the Indiana Jones Invisible Bridge, which is, if you are old enough to remember the third Indiana Jones movie, there's a part where Indiana Jones has to walk out on this invisible bridge, and he has to take a little bit of a leap of faith. And when he does it, he realizes the bridge was there the whole time and he was okay, right? And he like throws the sand out across the bridge and it was there. And he's like, oh, it's been here the whole time, right? And self-employment is a lot like that, where there's a lot more of a bridge that exists there if you're just willing to step out onto that bridge and take that leap of faith, right? And so I did that first in 2009. I was working as a chief marketing officer for a really large agency, and I started to notice in the world that this is when outsourced chief financial officers started getting really popular. So smaller businesses were hiring these outsourced CFOs to come in and help them and give them like more Fortune 500 style like CFO services. And I'm like, well, if they need that, they need marketing and sales help, right? So I took a leap of faith that I talk about pretty extensively in the book. And I didn't have a roadmap, right? I didn't have the sand to throw it out across the bridge. I didn't have anything. I was like, what I literally said to myself was, I'm going to go try to make this work for 6 months. And if I can't make it work for 6 months, then I'm going to have to go back and get a JOB, right? And I did not want to get a JOB again. But in 2009, which was 15 years ago, I was done with employment. I was 35 years old and I was cooked. Like I had it, right? And I'm like, I can't do another 25, 30 years of this. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make this work. So I went and I made it work. Right. And I remember through all of the last 15 years, I'm going to say up until about 2016, 2017 is where I started to think about maybe writing the book. Right. I started writing the book in 2020. It published in 2023. But there was a point where I was sitting there saying, I had a lot of people who were coming to me and saying, hey, look, how did you do it? How did you make this leap? How did you get out from underneath the corporate like ball and chain and go do that? Like, what is the roadmap for this? Right. What is the thing that, and so I was also an adjunct professor. So I teach part-time too, which is another great way into self-employment. Honestly, there's a whole path there as well. But I would just write a lot of things down. Like, what do I want to tell my students? Right. And what I wanted to tell my students turned out to be the things that I wanted to tell everybody, right? Which was like, here's exactly the formula, how you go and do this. So my goal in writing the book, my goal in here it is, Wall Street Journal bestseller.
Boom. Trust me, I'm a consultant.
Yeah. Trust me, I'm a consultant. And it is literally to lay out that path. It is a roadmap, a very detailed roadmap. A lot of books are like a 30,000 foot view of like, here's the thing you can kind of go and do, right? And I hate those books. I buy books because I want detailed knowledge. So I wrote detailed knowledge into this book on how to leave your day job, get into self-employment, and how to do it without, falling off the Indiana Jones Invisible Bridge, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. That's the least ideal outcome, is for us to completely fall flat on our face without having the possibility of coming back. Because you can probably think, if you're looking at entrepreneurs or people that you look up to that maybe have done something entrepreneurial, they probably failed a half a dozen times plus. I mean, failure is not something that you should be prepared to not face. But yeah, falling off the bridge, we don't want that. We do not want to have someone quit their day job and then just be living on the street. That would be maybe an example of that. But yeah, Chris, I mean, it starts to kind of get the gears turning with how we're going to get into your story about how specifically you did that. But related to the success portfolio, and you mentioned when you were a professor, you write things down, some tangible ways to get thinking about what goals might be, where are you headed with this journey. It always gets me to think about, like, what is success? What are you defining it as? What's your end goal? Where are you moving towards? And so I'll ask you, Chris, what is your definition of success today, and how has it maybe changed over time for you, or maybe it's remained the same?
I'm going to give you two definitions, and one is real. I think they're both pretty good definitions, but one's more applicable to this conversation than the other. So I'll give you the first one. I heard a guy, I saw some video, I think it was on Instagram. This guy said the definition, and I totally picked up on this. He said the definition of success, especially when you've had really good financial success and you've been a hardcore executive entrepreneur, something like that. Success is that your adult children still want to talk to you. Okay. And I was like, wow, that is really, and I'm like, I'm proud to say I have 3 adult children, and I'm like, and I have a great relationship with them. I'm like, okay, something worked out right there. Right.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right. Your definition of success will vary depending on who you are as an individual. And I was just talking to some kids on Sunday about this in a youth group where I was like, hey, when I was a kid, I was on a ski team, and my coach taught me the process or the practice of visualization. Like, we would sit up at the top of the run, we'd picture ourselves going through each gate, how fast we're going, what our time is going to be coming out the other end, and all that. Entrepreneurship is the same thing. You really have to visualize it. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to make this leap and I'm going to go do this. Let's say you're a graphic designer and you're going to finally take that leap and you're going to become an independent graphic design artist, and you're going to work for a bunch of clients, and you're going to eventually hire other artists that are going to work underneath you and all that other stuff, or whatever all those roles are. If you're a technician inside of a company, you're very well poised for being able to go out and do something in self-employment, right? And so I use graphic designer as an example a lot because I get contacted by a lot of graphic designers who are trying to figure out how to do this, right? So because it's one of those great professions that makes it really easy to go do it, right? But you have to look out and you have to ask yourself a couple of questions, like, why am I doing this? Am I ready to work longer hours? Do I actually need a boss? Like, most people need a boss. 80% of people need a boss. They need somebody who's literally there. They might complain about, I see this all the time with like millennials kind of complain about this a lot in social media, where it's like, oh, my boss is such a micromanager. I'm like, bro, you need a boss. clearly, right? Like what you think is micromanagement is probably just management. And so a lot of people just need a manager. They just need someone that they're accountable to, and they got to show up. If you're in that 20% that doesn't need a manager and you're just self-starter and you're going to go get it done, you are very well poised to be successful in self-employment, right? And so you have to ask yourself if you have some of those. There's a bunch of other traits that I go through in the book of things that you really need to sit down and evaluate. But you have to ask yourself, you're like, okay, what kind of salary do I want to earn, right? Like how much money do I want to make? How am I going to divvy up my time? For me, there was a point where I was like, you know what? I was doing pretty well. And I was like, I don't want to work on Fridays this year. It was 2017, 2018. I was like, I'm like, I don't want to work on Fridays this year. And I looked at everything and I was like, you know what? I can do this. I don't have to work on Fridays this year. This is pretty cool. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull back a little bit on some. I'm like not going to try and go kill myself with a bunch of clients. I'm going to pull back a little bit. I'm going to take Fridays off. And that was super beneficial from especially a mental standpoint. It was really, really good. Right. So if you're doing it because you're like, hey, I'd like to make more money. I don't care if I make as much money as I made at work before. I'm not trying to go kill myself and have a company of 50 or 100 people or something like that. I'm not trying to raise money and do all this other stuff. And I just want to kind of like not have a boss and not get hassled and just go do my art. Perfect. Great. There's a path for that. Right. But you have to kind of sit down and ask yourself, what is we call this a lot, and I work a lot in marketing and advertising. And we always talk about this. What is your why, right? Well, especially as a product, what is your why? Well, you're the product. When you're self-employed, and especially if you're a consultant, you're going into those types of consulting roles, you're the product, right? But what is your why? Why are you doing this? Do you want to do this for the independents? Like if you have, like my business partner, I own an agency. I have a business partner at that agency, and his daughter is like this star Mia Hamm soccer player, right? And he's gone a lot at these soccer events with his daughter. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of why we do this, right? Because it affords him the ability that he probably couldn't miss as much work as he misses if he had a job, right? So these are the internalizations that you have to have. You have to sit there and you gotta, like I did at the top of that ski slope for yourself, you have to sit there and go, okay, what does it look like 10 years from now? What's my net worth? How many hours a week am I working? Do I have employees? Do I want employees? Where do I live, right? Am I working at home? Do I have an office? You start asking yourself those questions, and then you start to work backwards from 10 years out or 5 years out, whatever you want it to be, into where you're currently at. And then you're like, okay, how do I get to the first step of now getting customers and actually starting to do that work and driving toward that goal?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it relates to episode 82, actually. Evan Neerman, we talk about cancel culture, and we kind of go into a lot of different topics regarding that. But one thing he shared that you just kind of basically enunciated as well, which is so important and it really resonates with me, is the reverse engineering aspect of a goal or of a process and thinking about where you want to be and clearly defining it and then working backwards. And I think maybe you find that becomes easier over time. Maybe it doesn't. At least for me, when I sit back and think and try to clearly articulate, there is a point where it becomes like I've gone a little too far. And so one of Evan's pieces of advice was to shorten that up a little bit. Maybe start with like 12 months, maybe 24 months, maybe 36 months. So Chris, yeah, I mean, I think with that, the transition from being in a JOB to going to self-employment, you probably, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you probably want to start with a little bit more of a shorter term, reverse engineered mindset. Is that possibly what someone should do?
Yeah, that's totally fine because you may not like it, right? In fact, there's a lot of people. I'm working with a group of people right now. I meet with them they're a group of people in my community, and I meet with them every Thursday night. And most of them are small. They have two jobs. They've got a small business and they got a real job, right? Most of them they're straddling self-employment and employment, and they're trying to figure out how to break out of employment and get full-time over. And I'm trying to help all of these guys finally step out of their jobs and get them into their self-employment situation. And a lot of that is most of them are ready to do it. They just have fears. There's a lot of fear. I call it FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And we have to help people overcome fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt will be the thing that prevents you from doing this, right? You solve fear, uncertainty, and doubt by basically through knowledge, information, and asking a lot of questions, right? So you got to get all the information to get all your questions answered, and then it makes it a lot easier to step into it. I'm digressing there a little bit, but there is a sorry, I just lost my train of thought. There's this place where Um, okay, so to your point right there, right? This is a good point. You're like, yes, I'll just say yes to what you said, which is, okay, what if it's like, okay, I'm just going to go do this for 12 months and see if I like it. And if you don't like it, it's okay to go get a job, right? Like, I'm not anti-job. I talk like I am all the time, honestly. Like, I talk like my wife thinks I'm like this like corporate anarchist and I'd burn all the buildings down if I could, right? You know, because the way I talk about it. But it's like, if it doesn't work for you, I don't want you to be broke, right? Go ahead and go back and get a job, and then you can reset and you can try again. In fact, before I finally broke out, there were times when I tried to break out a little bit and I had to retreat back into a job. I had to go get a job, right? And I talk about that in the book as well. So it's okay. Yeah. If you're like, but I would caution you, I'd say, if you're going to go into a model like that, where you're like, okay, I'm going to go 12 or 24 or 36 months or something like that, whatever it is, 10 years, make sure you have 6 months of financial runway, at least 6 months of financial runway, so that you can make sure that you don't go broke in the process. And you just got to be really good about the math and understanding where you sit financially.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Chris, too. I wasn't certain if I was going to be allowed to say the word job. That's why I just said job, because I was like, oh, I don't know if he's going to jump off this call if I say job. He's like, job? What do you? It's like the playoffs video. Talking about playoffs. Talk about a job.
It's a swear word. So sometimes I sound it, just spell it out, because it's like, yeah, job. Ugh,
it sounds gross in your mouth, doesn't it? To be able to say that. So you've basically done that transition. You've gotten to be self-employed now. And so looking back, I'm sure that there's probably a lot of hindsight where you think, oh, I could have done this, should have done that. How does one combat those feelings when they start making moves and they potentially have some feelings of, maybe not let's call it regret, but like they just have hindsight viewpoints where they think, man, I probably should have done this or could have done this.
That's okay. It's okay as long as you're learning from it, right? Because I see so many people who make those mistakes and they don't learn from those mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail. Like, there's just things that are going to happen in life. Once you get into it, you're going to kick yourself because you'll say something stupid in a pitch and you won't get a deal, or something like that. That's happened to me multiple times, right? Where I'm like, oh my gosh, I just said this thing and I'm not going to get it. I didn't get the deal, right? There's things like that happen all the time. You just have to learn from them. It's so frustrating for me. I have someone who's close to me that started a business, and the business went broke, and he blamed everybody but himself, and he didn't learn anything from the experience, and it was super disappointing to watch. It was super frustrating and disappointing to watch. It's okay to fail. Just make sure you learn from the failure, right? And then apply it forward into whatever the next thing is you're going to go do.
Yeah, that's such a helpful thing to hear. It's just to be comfortable with the fact that failure is probably going to be something that you encounter as an entrepreneur. And as you move into, the side hustle to self-employment, basically, talking about when someone starts a side hustle, is there an inflection point where they know it could be something where you could take it as a self-employed opportunity? You might get into this into the book, and we'll get into, I want to touch on, some other avenues of, you have some hilarious chapter titles in your book. And so I want to share a few of those and just ask you your favorite. But before that, Chris, if someone has a side hustle and they're making some money with it, at what point are they able to maybe make a decision on whether or not they could take it full time?
It's different for everybody depending on what they're doing. But typically there's going to be a point where you're starting to see, you're either at the point or you're starting to see that you're coming up on the point that the amount of income that you're making on your side hustle is matching up to the amount of money you make in your current W-2 job. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, then it just becomes this question of like your risk tolerance, right? Because it's like, okay, man, take a look. Because you really, like, nobody wants to, like, here's the thing that's really dangerous is you can't serve two masters. So it will literally, if you keep both feet, or you keep 2 feet into each camp, right? One in self-employment camp, one, and you're trying to straddle that. Like I'm working with this Thursday night group. Oh man, I'll tell you what, there's a point where that unravels. It falls apart. One will eat up the other one, right? And you'll have so much work coming in on the side hustle side that you'll just be like, hallelujah, I'm out of the job. Or your job will be like, what is going on with you? Like because your work will start to suffer on the job side because you're so like stuck on the other side, right? You got all this other stuff going on with your side hustle stuff as well. And work they might even fire you and force you into the side hustle. I've seen that happen a lot to people. They're like, yeah, I just got fired and I just had to go do it. And it was like, okay, how would that go? Good. Best thing that ever happened to me, right? So don't let yourself straddle it too long, but you can test it. Like I'm okay with testing it, right? I tell people all the time, test it for some period of time, but you got to look at it. And I think that point that we just discussed is a really good point where it's like, okay, is it finally matching up? Are you going to be able to replace your income? Do you have that 6 months of income set aside in case something happens or goes wrong, right? A big thing for people too is a lot of businesses require some type of equipment financing. And so like I'm working with guys who are like, they're just getting their financing through for like heavy equipment. They're going to go be a heavy equipment operator. They finally have their own heavy equipment operation business. Let's say it's an excavator business, right? And it's like, I'm like, okay, well, guess what? You just got an SBA loan and you now have a $250,000 piece of equipment sitting on a trailer in your driveway. Guess what? You're now you now own a company, right? I mean, especially the bank and the SBA feel that way too. You got an SBA loan that you got to pay now, right? And they're like, I'm going to work, right? So you're off to the races there. So there's some points where it's obvious to you that it's there, and there's other times where you just have to look at your situation and go, okay, if I look around at everything that's going on for me right now, this seems like this might be the place where I got to jump, right? But it's going to vary by person. It's going to vary by person.
Yeah, that's really, I was thinking it would certainly have some variability, but having that, if you're making enough on the side hustle where it matches what you're making in your W-2, that certainly would be, that's pretty easy math for anybody can just calculate. What do you get paid? Every 2 weeks, times it by 2, that's probably roughly your monthly income. And so, and also like a further point there is that I've always believed that if you can get, passive income or side income, whatever you want to call it, because it's not ever truly passive if you're putting time into it. But if you can get that number to match up with what your expenditures are while you're still working a traditional job, that potentially can allow you to get a little bit more comfortable to make the leap. Maybe not right then, but you could start to see how, hey, I'm covering most of my expenses with not my traditional job. So it's like you can start thinking, what is your risk tolerance? Like you just mentioned, do you feel that you could jump into it? What if tomorrow something drastically changed and your business now is somewhat irrelevant in the marketplace? Is that an oh shit moment? It might be for some people. Other people, maybe they don't have just 6 months. Maybe they got 9, maybe they got 12 months of money saved where they'd be okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, mileage may vary, right? Yeah, for sure. It's definitely different for everybody. I've got a guy too that I've worked with for years where he has a job and he's okay taking on like 10 to 20 hours a week of outside work. And it's actually a pretty good model. Like he just set up an LLC as an S corporation. He runs all of his like like his phone expenses, his car expenses, everything goes through his LLC. The LLC basically has no profit, makes no money. All of those write-off, all those expenses become write-offs that normal employees don't have. And he still lives off of an employment, like a W-2 paycheck. Right. So it's like he's kind of living, and he's okay with that model. I think most people get really sick of that after a while, but he's been fine with it for years. He's like, it actually works pretty good for me. I can do it like all day long. And he's like, and I love the tax benefit. I love writing off my vehicle. I love writing off my insurance. I love writing off my phone, and he's like, and I have he's like, all the stuff gas, right? He's like, all that flows through my corporation as a write-off, and all the money that I get after taxes on my W-2 paycheck is all money for me, right? So it's everybody's different, right? Like my thing that I just say is, okay, to each his own. It's like, just like, don't be on your deathbed and be wondering like, oh, should I have done that? Should I have taken that leap? Don't do that. Just take it. Just try it. Right. It's not as risky as you think. It's really not as risky as you think, right? To get out there and go do it. So just get out there and go try it, right? That's what I think. Especially if you find yourself in that situation where you have the runway and you got, it looks like you got a doorway into some clients and some things like that. Go for it, man. Go for it.
Yeah, that's uplifting words there, Chris. And it really, it makes me think about, when you have an idea that you think might have a market fit and you get some opinions from trusted friends or people that could be potential customers of the product, and you start to see, it's all about, I feel like, building confidence within yourself and your idea or whatever you're offering to provide value. Do you believe that fear is really like the main reason that people avoid that jump? Or what would be, if not fear, what would be the main reason people avoid jumping into self-employment from a side hustle, even when they can see that it is making money?
It's a combination of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So fear is just fear. Uncertainty is, yeah, it's working, but is it? right? So what you said is really like key. It's like, well, is there going to be a change? The economy going to change, something like that? And then doubt is literally just your confidence as an individual. It comes down to how you feel as an individual and your ability to be able to go make this happen. And so the combination of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD, those three things, when you put those three things together, they're a powerful negative that's trying to work against you. And you can't let that thing fester and like grow. It will grow, and it will like, it will turn into a cancer in your world, and it will prevent you from going and doing things that you should just go and try. It's man, I want to tell this story. I know somebody who spent a lot of time with they're a doctor. Okay. And they worked in the ER for a long, long time. I don't know if you've ever known an ER doctor. ER doctors don't have a lot of hobbies. They don't have a lot of hobbies because they see the 1% of accidents that happen, and they see them all day long, right? We don't see this ever. We never, as a normal, unless we're in the accident, that one time in our life when we're in a car accident or something like that, we got to go to the emergency room. But this is all they do all day long, is they service people who are like been in plane crashes and car accidents and sporting accidents and all this. And like literally it affects their psyche. They're like, I can't take any risks. They think they're going to end up on the gurney. Right. And so it's really sad to kind of see that in this situation where it's like, because it's preventing this individual from living life. Right. So if I remember when I was in MBA school, this is another point on this. This is another story on this point. I remember when I was in MBA school, I was younger. I was in my late 20s. And I remember there was a guy probably in his mid 40s that was in one of my classes. And he talked one night, he was in class, he was talking about how he went bankrupt. And like he started a company and the company went broke and he put everything he had into it and he went bankrupt. And I would like, I'm listening to this and I'm like, wow. And then he goes, and this really left an impression on me. He goes, I just woke up one morning after like I'd filed for bankruptcy. My wife divorced me, like all this stuff. And he's like, and I realized I'm fine. Everything's okay.
Yeah, life's going on, right?
Yeah, life just keeps going, right? And here he was, like in his 40s in MBA school. He's like, I'm in MBA school. I got a great job now. I've recovered from the bankruptcy. I have a new wife. You know, everything's like everything. And so, look, life is going to hit you. It's going to hit you hard and fast. It's hit most people on this podcast hard and fast. They've already been through life experiences, right? You're going to continue to experience these life things that they're going to happen to you as you go on. Don't let that stop you from going out and living that dream, that thing. If you're like, hey, what if I would have gone and done that thing? What if I would have gone and started that particular type of business or done that one thing I always thought about? Don't let those things stop you. Just go do it.
Just do it. You know, Nike's slogan, just jump in, just do that. Just go for what you think might work and try to, I like the metaphor too of like jump out of the plane and build the parachute on the way down. I forget exactly who told me that first. I know a guest on my show did mention it, and you have to go back to the archives to find that one. I'm not 100% certain on it at this exact moment, but I love thinking about it because if you think of it that way, obviously no one's ever going to do that and jump out of a plane because you'll die. If you can't build a parachute, it's kind of a ridiculous metaphor. But the point of it is that you learn as you go, and you're not going to know all of if you wait until you feel completely ready to jump into something entrepreneurially, you're just never going to start. You're going to just sit there and talk about it. And then you might end up, 50, 60 years from now, whenever you're at that age where you could be in a nursing home and get asked, what are your life regrets? The last thing you want to have is a bunch of what could have happened if I would have pursued this business idea I had when I was, in my mid 30s or something like that. And so, yeah, Chris, I think you touched on this earlier about your book and how it's called Trust Me, I'm a Consultant. We're going to tag the link in the show notes so everyone can go and get their copy as well. But you mentioned, the difference about your book is a detailed roadmap. And that is the differentiator between your book and other books about entrepreneurship. Would you share with us the Cliff Notes version without ruining the book about the roadmap and how you might take a person, let's call them Max, and they have a W-2 job and they're about to start a side hustle. Let's take Max from being employed to being self-employed and give him a timeline.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, and yes, I do provide a pretty detailed roadmap. The book is written more like a memoir because I've had all these really wacky situations I've gotten into as a consultant. I mainly spent my career in marketing consulting. And I've just walked into these companies and I'll take on like their marketing departments or whatever. And I just see crazy, crazy stuff all the time, right? Like wacky stuff over hundreds of companies. And so I wanted to entertain and educate. So I tell a lot of the crazy stories in the book. And that's why it has like a lot of the crazy like chapter titles that it has. It's meant to be that way. It's kind of link baity, right? It's like, talking about how all kinds of things, right? Like this diabolical plan to get even with Reed Hastings, who was the CEO at Netflix, right? I had this CEO I was working with, and he had this horrible idea, and I couldn't get him off this idea. And finally, he told me that the impetus of the idea was that he had been in this. I'm not going to go into the details on it because I don't want to reveal these people, right? But like this guy had been in this sporting match with Reed Hastings, the CEO at Netflix, and Reed Hastings had insulted the guy's wife.
Oh, geez.
In the sporting match. And he was like, I'm going to get revenge on him. Right. And I was like, are you out of your effing mind? Like, this is like your motivation. Like, you're going to go build this thing and try and take on Netflix because this guy insulted your wife during a sporting event. I'm like, you got to be like, he's insane. Right. So anyway, so there's, I talk about how I got paid a job interview once, which is also an interesting way into self-employment, that story, right? The basic model is this is you have to have clients, right? And so most people are sitting there going, well, I have a skill set. I'm an accountant. I'm a computer programmer. I am a graphic designer. I'm a photographer. I'm a videographer. I'm whatever, right? I got these skills, but most people don't know how to go and get clients. And so they spend a detailed amount of time in the book talking about how to get a client, which is like the most basic thing that you can talk about, right? Where are the places that you go to get a client? What are the things that you do? And there's a number of things. Your current employer could be your first client. I talk about how to do that in the book. I saw a great video on TikTok the other night where these two ladies that are consultants answered this question. This very question we're talking about, how do you get clients? And they said this, which I talk about in the book as well, is just start telling people that you do this type of work and you're looking for clients and they will show up. Start talking to the right people. Start putting yourself in the right events, talking to the right people. If you go tell your grandma, hey, grandma, I'm thinking about becoming a consultant, guess what that's going to yield you? Probably nothing, right? But if you get yourself into the right events, if you get yourself into the right groups of people, if you take the right people to lunch, if you leverage networks that you may have or you don't have, right? Everybody has some type of a network. They just don't realize it. I kind of help you walk through this process of discovering, like, how do you know people, right? You're going to find out really, really quickly that most of the skills that are technical skills inside of a business are in very high demand for consulting in other businesses. So how do we then build the bridge to get over to those people and then do a deal with them and start working towards now? And again, this could be, you can do it a couple of ways. You can stay in your job and you can bridge it and you can try it out. You can jump right in. Let's say I got the runway. I want to go do this. I found 3 clients immediately. I'm going to go get into it. Great, right? We talk about how to get there. But every great I don't think you can be a great entrepreneur or a great solopreneur without being a great salesperson. So you have to kind of find your inner salesperson. There was a point in my life where I didn't believe I was a salesperson. And then I discovered my inner salesperson. And guess what? Now all I want to do is sell. I sell all day long. That's what I do. And I believe that everybody is a salesperson. Everybody has the capability to sell. So it's not like an entrepreneur where maybe they're born, maybe they're made. There's a big debate about that. Everybody can be a salesperson. And so that's a big component of your success, is finding that inner salesperson, understanding where to get your first clients, building your offering, building your personal brand, and then getting out there and actually getting a reputation and being of value. You don't have to be like this massive value to the company. You just have to be an incremental degree better than the other people that are there. That's the big secret. Like, I hope people just heard that, right? Because you think you're like, oh, I got to be some rock star. No. You just have to be a little bit better than the people who are already inside of the company, and they will retain you all day long to do work for them.
Yeah, and that relates so directly to entrepreneurship with, you just have to create something. If you aren't creating something completely novel, you have to make an improvement on something that exists. And there are so many examples out there of companies that have done that, where they weren't the first into that space, but they did something a slight bit better, a slight different little kind of twing to it. And yeah, it's like inspirational to think that you don't have to, most ideas that are out there in the world, or most things that you think of, probably have been thought of before, in all honesty. But do all of them exist? Do all of them exist to the point where they're a company making money? That answer is probably no. And so, and Chris, with the chapters, I want to make sure I mention, you know, the chapters in this book. I mean, I was scrolling through and just laughing my ass off, to be honest, because you have, you know, I don't know if you've ever tried stand-up comedy or if you've ever done anything related to that. Just looking at you on the Zoom call. Your marketing call, yeah.
I know the value of a good headline, right? That's like
my
marketing training is probably what kicks in here, right? So yeah. I wanted to entertain people and educate them. That's why I did it that way.
Well, there you go. It's a perfect blend. I mean, because you got a chapter like how to make money by exploiting CEO egos, and then I pissed my adult diaper on a Zoom call. I mean, just these are gold. I mean, so when you get your hands on the book, y'all listening out there, you're gonna have fun with this. If you're watching the YouTube right now, you can see Chris on there. Right when I started talking to him, he reminded me of one of my favorite comedians, Tom Segura. I don't know if you like him, Chris, or if you've heard of him, but to me, that's a huge compliment. Just his awesome. Demeanor and his delivery, and you know, you've got the little beard going on and stuff. And so, yeah, I think it just the way you've said a few things. I'm like, man, I'm talking to an entrepreneurial version of Tom Segura right now.
That's good. No, Tom's awesome. I appreciate that.
Oh man, he's hilarious. And so, yeah, you blended fun with education in that book. And I'm sure that's what also made you a wonderful professor, because the teachers that I always engaged with and felt the most connected to were the ones that were relatable. You know, it's like they're people just like you and I. They're not, you know, some upper, you know, tier of knowledge that you can't attain. And I think that's a helpful, you know, insight to just think about entrepreneurship. Like the people that you look up to, maybe you're watching and you're looking up to Chris right now and thinking, you know, gosh, he's written a book. He's got all this knowledge. He's led that charge from going into the self-employed world, and he's able to now have freedoms and he's able to have connections that he didn't have previously. And it's not that, you know, you don't want Chris's life because you don't want to be exactly like somebody else, but you can find your version of it. And I think that Chris's book, Trust Me, I'm a Consultant, certainly can help you do that. We'll tag that in the show notes, as well as any personal links to get to Chris's companies and his materials. But if someone's listening, Chris, and they want to connect with you personally and learn more, or maybe just talk to you about something you shared on the show, is there a best way to do that?
Yeah, you can reach me. Like I'm very accessible online, right? I'm like everywhere is just Chris Knudsen, right? You know, LinkedIn /Chris Knudsen. I own that, right? You just find me all over the place. The book's website is sevenfigure.consulting. That's not a .com, sevenfigure.consulting. Yeah, you can. I'm very, very accessible. I'm in all social media. I'm very easy to get to that way. And feel free to reach out to me. Absolutely. I love it when people reach out and they say, hey, I've read the book and I got some questions for you or whatever. So I won't ignore you or ghost you. I would just appreciate when people show up. It's great. It helps give me like, oh yeah, that's why you did that. Right. Because you're helping people out. And that is why I wrote the book.
Yeah. To give back, you know, to be able to share what you've done. And that's your way of, you're paying it forward. I think it's a very noble thing to do. A lot of entrepreneurs share that. Chris, I'm so grateful for you being on the show today. Thanks for working with me to make the scheduling happen. And Chris Knudsen, we'll look forward to following your journey. We'll keep up with you soon.
Appreciate it, man. Great to be with you. Thanks.